Welcome everyone to another of our infamous after work talks here live on this channel. And we did some videos in the past, low-level graphic stuff and microkernel or multi-server microkernel and other OS design ideas. And people just yesterday on the other live stream joking, yeah, microkernel will never happen. And so yeah, let's talk shortly, and I will jump. I make one huge jump here first. So let's see if we maybe rush this in less than 1 hour. In a previous video, I said let's talk, did Linux kill most OS innovations? And the long story short is, with our microkernel, I'm certainly not that insane, in case you were wondering. So after the first 9 years of my experience with Linux from 1996 to 2005, in 2005 I thought like somehow there were these microkernels, certainly GNU heard and L3, L4 and other things, and somehow I thought was after 9 years in this, in running a distribution with Claire Wolf's there of Rock Linux and what later became T2 and still is today, I somehow was thinking all this old C code and Unix single address space monolithic Unix kernel that are the beasties in Linux. Somehow this is, even in 2005, not the level of security and modularity and stability we should have for a state-of-the-art OS. And certainly there were other things. Here's just a list of the hundreds or thousands of commercial operating systems. So is this a good idea? So long story short, too long didn't read, too long didn't watch. Commercial viability of a new microkernel in 2020, it's like, no, forget this. Story closed. Why not? Because certainly there are two major things contributing. First of all, competition. There's Windows, Mac OS, Linux already. And so usually something needs to be at least twice as good or twice as cheap, and cheaper than Linux, mostly anyway. And then, of course, the established platforms of Windows and Mac OS, there's also applications, and nowadays Android and iOS in the mobile space. So competing there, extremely difficult. Plus, so first of all, you need to actually write all of this, like not all these unsuccessful companies here who tried all of the stuff that for most of the time people usually didn't even heard, including like Plan 9 from Bell Labs, BOS, and all the other failed projects at Apple, including Ping and MK Linux and Copland and so on, of all the case you like, in trying to innovate macOS or trying to microkernel Linux, plus all the other stuff, including Huawei's upcoming Harmony OS, from which we still didn't see a sign, and well, not to mention all the commercial Unixes like HPUX, SGIRX and so on. So is this a good idea? Will it be successful? Long story short, unfortunately, most likely not. And I will take a look at this some minutes later in this video. This is mostly like, let's discuss this, let's throw some stuff. Ironically, so I made this video, did Linux kill most OS innovation, like about a year ago. And maybe you also want to eventually watch all the old videos, or old as in only 1 year old. In this pandemic times everything ages a little bit faster, and for all these discussions. But long story short, there are two things. So but if we come to the conclusion microkernel, new incompatible stuff will most likely not be successful, mostly waste of time, which is also why I've not done it since 2005, and maybe will do a little bit because crazy YouTube education stuff. Let's jump before I, in the end, come back a little bit to microkernel. So let's jump over this. Okay, we all agree that it's insane and will not be successful because so many reasons. Let's, for a moment, think about what could actually be more successful. And unfortunately, it is something like maybe some special flavor of Linux after all, and not because I run Linux since 20 years. So let's take this from the other side. As much as I would like to write some real new code, like not all the C stuff of single address space and so on, and if we forget about this, if we forget about code quality and security, basically what all commercial companies do, forgetting about code quality and stability and stuff, and like just bring something more successful to market. So what could it be? In my opinion, the easiest thing, and which is probably also why this old video, most people just do another Linux distribution, because yeah, this saves you all the time of doing all the hard work of all the thousands of drivers and a lot of other infrastructure. And because if you write your own microkernel, yeah, the thousands of drivers, although nowadays maybe just ATI, AMD, Radeon, because NVIDIA, yeah. But there it even starts, maybe 2 drivers, certainly inspiring from open source bits, and Intel and AMD, because NVIDIA, no documentation. NVMe, so certainly you can do some shortcuts of supporting only the most common currently stuff if you would want to do desktop and not some embedded stuff. And Eloy writes, QNX from BlackBerry pretty successful. Symbian also, yeah, although QNX was more successful, I think nowadays it's maybe not as successful anymore, but thank you for the comment. I would probably also, from normal people who heard about this, close to 0, similar to BOS and other stuff, but yeah, certainly also one of the things that already 20 years ago in terms of QNX was more expiring. So what could be more successful, if you think about people have applications and they somehow want to use it, and certainly a lot of people in the office need to use Microsoft Office, it might be actually more commercial successful to do yet another Linux distribution, and maybe certainly not in the form that is our T2 here. And so if you want to do something more successful, where's even my other website, or probably this, is if you, and as usual, leave me in the comments below. So if you take Linux and leave out a lot of the infrastructure, like all the failing stuff like systemd and Pulse Audio and maybe GTK Plus and stuff, and then make like something snappy on top, kind of what Next Step has done with the Unix and Mach microkernel. Of course, the end result would be a little bit in concept like what Next Step has done, or macOS is somewhat still today. And in terms of greatest compatibility, you could even integrate Wine as or what nowadays the new kids around the block know as Proton there from Steam, but of course it is Wine. So theoretically you could make a pretty Windows compatible custom Linux distribution that is more like a macOS with a Windows compatible subsystem, and otherwise some snappy apps. I'm somewhat certainly there is like Elementary OS or something, but if you take this concept to satisfy most normal users at home, I think this could be something truly successful. And I also wonder that all the big, so much to all the innovation, even like a decade ago, I was already thinking microkernel, which I also published a couple of times, and a lot of things I sometimes said in the past eventually became successful somewhere, and certainly not unlike what Apple has done at times. There is also one more thing. So nowadays, I mean, very theoretically, some really crazy idea, and this is also, like engineers, like inventors, what are they thinking? So, I mean, at the end of the day, you need to white weather doing some really nice thing from scratch that will be huge of work and sell next to 0, like, because it might be incompatible with everything else. Might not be worth the effort, even if it like would be nice, like BOS and Haiku today, and even that open source Haiku is not like the most successful thing because compatibility and applications and stuff. And maybe you could even take like Haiku and use the Wine compatibility layer, just as a crazy thought. But I'm also somewhat a tiny little bit tempted, and you could drive this crazy, right? To insane, like differently insane than multi-server microkernel from scratch, because honestly, at the end of the day, no normal user or business will choose AOS over it's incompatible with everything else, but it's like snappy and stable and high security and whatever, if they can get the work done. So to bring this one step further, we could we could take our T2 Linux, use it to build this like integrated thing that is like as nice as BOS or Windows or maybe macOS, so to say. And the next thing is, so Wine at like Wine, don't promote Wine. It's like, okay, you can run most Windows apps like snappily, super integrated, like you don't even really notice it. Like if you want to, not that we promote it, but it's there. And the next thing could be just add the Android subsystem there as well, so that you also get all the mobile apps for those who want to bring some Zoom or other GoToMeeting and other business kind, productivity app kind of stuff around. And I'm really wondering why do I need to tell this to people here live on YouTube in 2020 and not all, Linux market share. Actually, I didn't Google it recently. Is it over 1% Linux desktop market share? Why do I need to tell this Linux distributions? Maybe they are satisfied with as successful they are. If I would be Red Hat or, well, Red Hat purchased by IBM, maybe they are happy, but if I would be others, I really have to wonder why I need to point out the obvious as an unsuccessful woman YouTuber here to like Ubuntu. Why has Ubuntu not developed something like super nicely integrated to the end user, where like someone recently said, if you need to run a command line to install and run some Linux distributions, then it's already a fail for something obvious like getting your graphic to work. I really wonder why Ubuntu doesn't have created a product that is like as instantly to use like macOS with a Wine compatible Windows subsystem thing, and nowadays maybe Android that solves maybe 90% of the app compatibility, and otherwise, so that are some thoughts that might be like certainly a magnitude more successful. I'm somewhat tempted to try this in terms of the nowadays of European Union more self-sufficient, self-reliable cloud initiative, something, whatever. Maybe to create such a T2 flavor of, this is some end user capable of install, like boot and install like macOS and with Windows and Android compatibility for all the app stuff. One big question is what to do with the UI, and if you really think it's through, not like, hey, let's do something new from scratch because the usual not invented here syndrome, which I already mentioned in some videos. Certainly, I'm also tempted, like, GTK Plus, not the greatest fan, wasn't in 1998 for GSMP, our multi-track sound recorder. We used JTK --, so C++ binding. But otherwise, GTK Plus, this near C with static UI stuff, in my opinion, not the latest and greatest state of the art for 2020. Qt also not, although more C++ native, the same static, and in my opinion, for real nice UIs in 2020, like real usable and like really polished, like, so to say, Apple kind of sort of polished, and if they don't have peak bugs and layout is falling apart. I would, unfortunately, similar to not invented here syndrome, but it's like what is out there, like also Fox at FLTK and WX widgets, and it's like, very theoretically, we could apply the same concept of take what works. And if we think about nowadays, most UI is web, and very theoretically, if we think this through, like makes this a modern technology of what is out there. Actually, I'm not showing that just. So very theoretically, you could come to the conclusion, okay, make this some web OS like of stuff, right? There's this behind. Sounds familiar, right? There certainly was something like this. There is of Palm Pre phone, and nowadays sold and stuff, and ended up apparently at LG, I think. Is it currently owned, but doesn't matter too much who owns it right now. The only problem is, so there's always some catch with this kind of thinking, right? Take what is there, what is like 90% compatible and usable and stuff, like Wine for Windows apps and Android for mobile apps. Like just certainly not the whole Android, just like the API frameworks to have in the system like Wine, right, to run the apps. The big problem with this and why the problem why WebOS probably wasn't the most successful is because it was super slow, right? I have it here, maybe I should have actually prepared better for this video. I take it out of the drawer. I have the first Palm Pre phone. It was super slow. I only brought it as I thought maybe that is the future, but obviously it wasn't. The problem with that approach is, as good as it sounds, in my opinion, web development is not the most amazing. It's just YOLO together of clobbered and just random APIs over decades of what was hypertext markup language with some CSS, with some JavaScript, and then everything edit and stuff. And in my opinion, certainly it shines. Sure, today we have HTML5 and Canvas and all what kind of Bluetooth and USB APIs and who knows what other stuff. But this is a huge problem that in my opinion, developing web stuff is not very straightforward. It is like always like this circle and that circle and have there some HTML and then some styling, and like usually you end up like working around like trying to get this done when you need to simulate it with that layer and that overlay and this CSS trick. And instead of like I want this button or I want this blending, I want this animation, it's usually let's simulate it, let's hack it, let's do there some image tricks, let's do there some additional canvas and stuff fiddling and whatnot, but leave in the comments below what you think. And last but not least, second is HTML stuff with JavaScript. Even with the latest browser engines and JavaScript JIT, just-in-time compilation implementation, is super slow, right? We have seen this the other days, the last week when I cross-compiled this to MIPS and ARM, and we were running this here on single PCB, 1.2 GHz dual core MIPS and ARM. And sure, on flagship Android and flagship iOS, mobile web is kind of snappy, but sure, you can always throw an Intel Core i9 and AMD Ryzen on it and call it a snappy UI. But when you then take a 5-year-old Atom or otherwise not as amazing CPUs, or certainly think like 5 years in the future, take your AMD Ryzen today in 5 years, so web sites of the future might not be as mobile. You could certainly limit this, like not do crazy stuff with your local WebOS stuff. And this is the last point. The next, the last point certainly is, so maybe you could with this part, although it is not super amazing, maybe so. This is web native stuff. It sounds nice in theory. It failed at WebOS for the most part. Raise your hand who is running some WebOS powered smart TV today or invested into a Pre or Hewlett Packard smartphone or tablet of that day. Maybe though, from the perspective of you need a very snappy browser, like here of our T2 just compiled today, certainly Firefox 82 today, because state of the art, and can just cross-compile it on an AMD Ryzen in 20 minutes. From the point of view, you need a snappy web browser or most performance and most integrated experience. You could, of course, argue, sure, we have an amazing, a truly amazing, some would say the best web technology browser stuff there. We do the UI in it, or as you have already Android compatibility, you could use Android UI stuff for the UI. That is a little bit near, or actually very theoretically, I mean, you could also, like, if, for example, we or you or someone would like bring some truly successful, like really rivaling, which you see certainly is a challenge, right? Which is, we got from talking high state of the art, high-tech microkernels to, yeah, just like everyone else, let's like Apple and what Microsoft is now in with the Windows subsystem for Linux, and all the other companies like Google and Amazon and everyone just using Linux. Let's take, because we are greedy businessmen, right? So let's just misuse the open source community and use what they have there and make the best out of it and sell it for like hotcakes, like Android. We could actually a little bit. It's a little bit like the Chrome OS, just with some like browser only. So theoretically, if we call this like web native as much, but they also see the conflicts, right? The inner me is, while I'm saying this, it's like I could throw up from, in my opinion, the code quality that are websites and developing with HTML and CSS and JavaScript. But certainly that will trigger some web developers, and leave in the comments below what you think. But if we accept that, unfortunately, this Web 2 or Web 3.0 kind of stuff is the future, unfortunately, we could theoretically make the best out of this, make this like a Chrome OS, just like from Google, because privacy and similar things. Add the Wine subsystem for Windows compatibility, add Android stuff for like web native, plus Wine, plus Android allows you to run probably, I would hope, 90% of the stuff. And this actually might be truly successful, right? It's not as sexy, if there is something to say, like a sexy or well-designed and like state-of-the-art, instead like high performance, like high security, like nicely done, how a system should be nicely done. And if we ignore all those design principles of not single address space, of not everything in, not separately address space separated modules of drivers, and like network subsystem, if you have a Bluetooth or IPv6 security vulnerability, not your whole system is not vulnerable, but just your network stack, for example, and not all the rest. If we ignore these design principles truly, because that will not be successful, as seen from all the 1,000 unsuccessful failed projects here, what could theoretically, and I'm somewhat tempted of maybe 2020 with all the peak bugs and Android and macOS and stuff, I'm somewhat tempted to make such a target, because certainly I need to get off also my wife of macOS, my father of Windows. My father's already asking me, need some Linux version, because my old Windows system, and yeah, Linux is great, right? It's like, I need to think about this, and certainly can't emerge Firefox on his PC. So for a system for the masses, and I'm not talking another Linux distribution, right? In terms of, has Linux killed all the OS integration? I'm talking about a custom designed system that somehow mixes the best of the, also, yeah, it's coming full circle, right? Is it commercially viable to rewrite everything from scratch in a truly memory safe way? It's like, yeah, obviously not. Tried all this open source stuff for decades, barely someone wanted to pay for that. But it certainly is much more, like a magnitude more likely, and that is the businessman in me, like not the computer scientist, but the businessman is, of course, throw this memory safety and stuff overboard, like take what is there. This is certainly what all the 99.99% of, yeah, even Facebook, right? What has Facebook done for the community? Well, okay, there's some better FS and something, but otherwise Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and yeah, mostly taking 99% open source and just run with it. Again, somewhat tempted, because certainly writing a microkernel with all the drivers from scratch takes a decade or two without any income. And leave in the comments below what you think. There are some more comments. I see that. How long are we into that live stream? Hey, only 26 minutes. That is a quite compact summary. If we think so, I said I'd jump a little bit. So because this was maybe the more interesting conclusion, also for people like ReadDocsOS who wants to use a fully incompatible system, right? 2020, because that is of course the problem with writing, as much as I like, and don't get me wrong, probably I will most likely continue like my famous 20% project here of doing some state-of-the-art stuff, like for sure our own JIT compiler stuff and more firmware and microkernel stuff. But honestly, will it be commercial successful, and is it commercial viable? Certainly not, most likely not. some stuff I want to use commercially, like the JIT stuff I need because I want to do some stuff more amazing. So this JIT stuff will be used in some of our products. Maybe I can get some companies to sign up for some firmware development because, as I outlined, not sure if I probably in some microkernel video I outlined the code. Duplication in one of those, whatever. And this is certainly a thing, right? If you take a look at other, even so, here's a long list because what would it take to do a full microkernel from scratch? It's like, yeah, decades of work, stuff that others have done in not memory type safe languages as are C and single address based kernels that are Linux. And if you look at other companies' projects, so most company projects mostly failed. Even at Apple, they had so many, they even had a Unix, AUX or so, also Pink and Star Trek or what it was, like porting macOS to, like the classic macOS to Intel or so, trying to do this SMP and microkernel. A lot of the stuff failed, canceled. They even had some whatever blue, yellow, whatever box they were thinking to maybe bring some APIs to Windows. Cancelled and stuff like in the 90s. Obviously, a lot of like Plan 9. There's also certainly a lot of whoever has seen some L4 microkernel stuff in real life. Then certainly BOS that even with as free as Haiku re-implementation decades later, certainly a lower market share than Linux. Not to mention all the other stuff like Sallyfish, or that is this mobile OS thing of today, and similar stuff like WebOS and so on. So most stuff not commercially successful. And when you take a look at other big names like Minix 3, you really wonder, I mentioned this in another video, no news since 2016, I slightly wonder, that is also the difference, right? I'm still here, and this university-backed, like super pristine, or well-known academic project, no news in 4 years. Even I think I had this opened already. Even this GitHub no commits in since 2018 or so. If this is where to? Oh, wait a second. Now this is here. So this looks like the official Minix sources. I mean, I clicked from the Minix website. I would hope. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think the last commit is soon 2 years old, and I really have to wonder, that is also the difference between individual contributors and universities, or maybe there are personal reasons, maybe Andreas Tenbaum retires or is not happy that it's not as successful as he hoped, or he is pissed off that Intel used it in their management engine without them compensating them in some way. No idea what the issues are, but the problem, I'm not really impressed by the Minix source code. It's even more old C, well, beside Minix, and then nowadays a lot of user-space stuff from NetBSD. Something that I would, if I would have the choice, I would do from scratch. I said this before, like maybe bytecode dynamically JITted stuff for using the for all the benefits that JIT can give off, because all the user space stuff of ls and move and copy and stuff, and set and GNU.org and so on. Certainly you see me here recompiling the stuff for ARM and MIPS. It's also hilarious that certainly similar to other attempts, like what I wanted to mention is Java OS. So there was already something like that. So all the ideas, not entirely new, not entirely insane or crazy. Big companies have tried this before. Maybe some things were too early in terms of BOS, certainly. It's just, as I said, super truly difficult to bring a commercial alternative to Windows and macOS to the market. That was true for the 90s and is even more true in the 2020s, when especially everyone playing along at home and their business expects some form of compatibility and to get their work done and stuff to just work. But Yeah, so Java OS, there was a thing, and so it's not entirely unheard of kind of microkernel that is running on different architectures, which then can run stuff. Certainly back in the day, not just in-time compiler. I think if you don't over-design the frameworks in the way, I think the Java frameworks are somewhat over-designed, like truly huge and stuff. And if the just-in-time compiler is overwhelmed, especially 20 years ago in 1997 on Spark stations and Intel Pentiums of that age, then I think you can maybe with ahead of time caching and more minimalistic frameworks of not having megabytes, or even in terms of Firefox. How large is Firefox? Yeah, 100 megabyte of code size or sort of nearly. We can also fact check that, is because we are here a fact checking channel. So Optimus and true believers in science and scientific work. So also I need to accept -b because this what is here was lib Firefox like that. And if you take, yeah, just this libxubl thing, that is the majority of this stuff, is already, I think, 106 megabyte. And so, or is it 102 with a 1024 division. So the rest is mostly peanuts, like SQLite and whatnot, the usual, yeah, some case there, but everything in the kitchen thing, 102 megabytes, so 100, what in previous times was a Windows 95 release, now in just in one browser, which probably returns us to full circle of maybe web native. I certainly realize there's some comments. I just tried to streamline here's presenting my thoughts. So last but not least, if we take from Java OS to web OS, certainly not unheard ideas. But in terms of Minix, I wanted to say a minute ago that I'm not the most thrilled of their code quality. Where would be the kernel? Not some days since I said this, or maybe it's this, like let's click on some file system stuff that probably is not the best code. Not sure if that is pure kernel. There would be maybe Arch. Do we have here some? I'm mostly looking just for one. Okay, there is some scheduler kind of, or here are devices of, okay, let's click on PCI, and what would be PCI registers of what? Mostly not C files here for. Okay, fine. I'm sure we find something soon. Okay, client, click on this. And yeah, wonderful defines, because it is how we are doing. But otherwise, as old-fashioned C code as is the Linux kernel, and I would even a lot of stuff I've reviewed some years ago was even more old-fashioned, I wanted to say. So for the most part, not the most impressed with Minix. But at the end of the day, writing something from scratch or using Minix, as I said, compatibility, feature set, and just working stuff. And leave in the comments below. Maybe as you see, I have this T2, and certainly between PS3 and Octane and ARM and stuff, certainly due to all the YouTube work and presentation here, regaining new fans and momentum. But I am, of course, aware that no normal user at home, or, well, except you, but normal, right, like end user, like my father or some business, doesn't want to boot into text mode and stuff. So I'm somewhat, as there is not that much stuff out there, and certainly this integration work is still a lot of work, right? I could actually check what Google is using to build the Chrome OS stuff. It's a little bit like Chrome OS. And last but not least, even Google is, of course, creating new stuff with this Fuchsia, which actually I wanted to open this Google Fuchsia, Google. Oh, not really Git, but even Google is working on some new OS, and I looked, some of these concepts are even in some details what I proposed some year ago, even without, not sure if looking before that, or why is this so empty? But so the problem is, as usual, similar to Chromium, the build stuff. I tried to build it, it didn't even give me a text shell so much to state-of-the-art stuff, and then you build it, and at least for x86 you don't even get the shell. A little bit the problem, so some of this stuff, I mean, some of this Fuchsia stuff are nice in concept, like this system call details and other things that I mentioned. My impression is, well, I wonder that even big, but there you see, commercial, we are getting full circle, even with this topic, we are full circle, and even big mega corporations like Google, they try for years to write an operating system somewhat from scratch, and at the end of the day, not sure if they're using it yet somewhere, and probably they are with this, but yes, also what it takes to do development and research. Certainly they're not yet satisfied, or other marketing reasons why they're not using it. I feel from my side it's a little bit annoying that they have this Fuchsia interface definition language for IPC systems. It's like interface definition languages, usually I've rarely seen them being amazing. I've mostly seen them to be annoying and getting in the way. Then like using other languages like Dart, and I'm not sure maybe we check Wikipedia Fuchsia, and I think they were maybe using Go, like Dart, and also this is not Fuchsia hello. At least you can't blame them for. Also this is not V, but maybe I should not use an old membrane keyboard. Dart, Go, yeah, so I mean the problem, I mean, okay, it's written in everything. It's like, do you even see this on camera? No, you don't. It's written in everything. I mean, the good thing is it's a microkernel, just like one would do for some modern system. But then, yeah, mixing everything together, it's like, maybe they should not have tried Dart and Go and Rust. And for my taste, it's always, I would somehow prefer stuff to be a little bit more streamlined and not like using everything. But yeah, even in this case, so case in point, Google's Fuchsia, it's like, yeah, even I tried to build this. D-Tart here in the comments has recently rebuilt it, and he got a shell lock in, or I think he mentioned he now got even a UI in the emulator. But the last time, so some 2 months ago when I tried it last time, I neither got, at that time, it was like emulator UI, not supported, only on real hardware with support 3D, which is also a little bit, nah, would you not want to develop a new system from scratch with some emulated UI working? And I couldn't even get some SS secure shell terminal login thing that didn't work for me. This Fuchsia started to boot. I could see some messages, but there's supposed to be some FX or, yeah, because crazy full circle here, even their crazy build systems, they use their depot tools and FX or whatever to build it or something. And yeah, but anyway, looking forward to your comments. I saw there are plenty of comments and a lot of people tuned in for this crazy stuff. So long story short, I'm somewhat tempted because maybe there are some, certainly there are some Linux distributions like Elementary. Is it Elementary? There are, again, previous video. In the meantime, I think I recently recounted the last time. Last year we were at 1001 Linux distributions. I think in the meantime we have like 50 new. I think we in the meantime like 1051 Linux distributions. And yeah, Terry, was it? I mean, there's even, maybe it was this one, but again, compatibility, right? It doesn't have neither like Wine or Android. So the things I mentioned of like really, so like, let's, from our European perspective of digital self-reliance in this century, not like Wine existing Office compatibility, or it's certainly a nice looking OS, but yeah, I mean, there was even in previous times, I mean, Elementary OS is not the first thing. There was also Etoile or something of French, is it GNU, like pretty looking GNU step thing. Not sure if those people are still in business. I mean, at least the website still works, but This here is recent headlines of 2014, so maybe not. And so yes, sure, there are a lot of things. And in some ways, as community projects, I would maybe call them more innovative than SUSE, Debian, Red Hat, Ubuntu Linux of, yeah, sure, they are this old-fashioned working Linux distribution thing, but according to the recent market share numbers, not what end users would stand in line for in front of a fancy store to get. Which brings me to the last point. People don't want to pay for this, right? I mean, Linux is for free, although for Windows and Mac OS they somewhat pay. Certainly if we or someone else, like if you truly want some super amazing operating system, especially if you write it from scratch, as described in some earlier videos, and we will continue here somewhat for educational purposes. But if you develop something for some years with some decades of human work hours, you certainly can't do this. If it costs you a couple of millions to write from scratch, realistically, you can't give it away for free. So either you pay with your data, like at Google, or you need to charge for it like Apple did until they decided overselling your overpriced hardware is enough, and it's better end user license agreement wise to lock Hackintosh out of legally purchased operating system copies, that it's for them more financially clever to give it with a Mac for free, well, in the product price included, than selling it separately like they actually did until a decade ago, until maybe Mac OS 10.6 or so. But yeah, last but not least, you would need to somehow make money, and maybe doing something as I outlined here, of maybe the most successful variant, where did I even, probably something like here, the most successful variant of this endeavor, using, like all big Silicon Valley businesses, of reusing, if not misusing, open source, avoiding 99% of the development cost, just integrating some stuff, slapping some colorful and good-looking snippy UI integration on top of this, that even is Mac OS in terms of Mach and BSD kernel that they got from Next, that even Next didn't write from scratch but used the Mach kernel and BSD userland there. Sure, Next, they have written some code at Next and Apple, for sure, all the proprietary UI stuff that is today Mac OS and iOS, but yeah, full circle. Maybe nowadays, as much as I don't like it myself with some integrated app store, to have similar to Windows and to Microsoft and Apple and Google, some paying royalty. What I really also wonder is that all the major distributions, that they don't have like something for mobile. I mean, given the set state that is mobile, they also see the big distributions like Red Hat and SUSE and Ubuntu that just take some open source components. Sure, sometimes they contribute a little bit to KDE or something, but I also wonder that they don't have, like, they didn't even challenge Apple with iOS and Google with Android. So there came rather Google for the mobile. So the vast space, basically all the Linux vendors from Red Hat to SUSE left so much vast emptiness in the mobile space that Google could just come after all the decade of Linux work and just grab it with their proprietary Android without any of the major distributions having any solution in the mobile space. And if you want something successful, you could even like cloud sharing and stuff between your business kind of ready Linux flavor with mobile integration in terms of file sharing and copy and paste and continuity of writing an email on your tablet and continuing on your Linux desktop client, stuff like the major companies do for a while. Anyway, we also come full circle in terms of mobile, that yeah, where are the solutions, right? And except WebOS, which anyway, let's take a look at the comments. So there were some comments and many more people watching than usual, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong, I will of course continue here the YouTube views, and you probably want to share, like, and subscribe for my 20% endeavor of lunch breaks and after work of doing stuff. So of course we will continue some microkernel stuff, even on RISC-V and FPGAs, and similar fun, and writing graphic drivers from scratch. Like next also some microkernel, like UI first, my super snappy microkernel with 3D stuff. Of course, because it's a 20% project here after work and on weekends. In small steps is proof of concept. Certainly some rotating 3D stuff there and some windows, hopefully as if not more snappy than BOS. But the big question is, maybe I should really do it after watching this for 20 years, since around 1998. Maybe I should do another 20% project, because just taking those components certainly is very little work compared to writing a whole kernel from scratch with drivers and UI and stuff. And take our cross-compiling Firefox, take Wine, take the Linux kernel, take this infrastructure, and maybe this as per usual, by pure luck, chance, and good integration of features and other people's work, maybe that would even be something that users value of it just works, they can just use most application. And actually this could actually be way more successful, usable and satisfying to users. And even there we come full circle in terms of yes, did Linux kill most OS innovation? And yeah, full circle there of even ourselves. If we are being realistic, certainly there's very few space for new commercial, truly more stable, more snappy, more in whatever innovative engineered ways in terms of UI, 3D experience first and not an afterthought as it is in this monolithic single address space, or kernels, or like virtualization first. Think Cubes OS, certainly, as you see there are distributions for a lot of stuff. Yeah, theoretically, as I outlined in these previous videos, like virtualization, you could do so nice things if it would not be this Mac and Windows and iOS, Android user share application vendor login thing, and like total, because we don't have UI standards, there is POSIX and C and C++ and OS, like open read, write, close and similar POSIX API calls, but mostly due to the lack of cross-platform UIs and vendor login, of not being able to transfer applications easily, due to that it's extremely hard to establish some new OS, and maybe that are some interesting choices that for potential much more successful business endeavors. But and yeah, there we also see, even if we have the best intentions of as an engineer and computer scientist, this should be done better. This should be not a single address space. This should be multi-server microkernel for stability. And so many things should be also nothing in C. But this is also, last but not least, that is the problem with doing it from scratch. And if you do it from scratch without reusing, like the BSDs do, Linux does, all the Linux distributions, even Android, like reusing all the open source stuff, that even means for folksier, like C and C++, and if you then, there you see even big mega corporations, they just don't do from scratch everything. And that is, again, the scalability problem of, yes, if you do it better, it takes significant time and resources that very few people would appreciate or are willing to pay for. And that is, of course, a big problem with this. So last but not least, let's take a look at the comments, and I see much more. But this is also the thing, right? I do low-level, okay, at times boring Firefox, because all this infrastructure stuff, it's not like assembly programming, and so on. It's just like reading the freaking manual and trial and error until it freaking works. With Firefox, very few people, or not as many people tune in. You do some high-level business, business operating system sales pitch live stream, and the most people tune in than ever. But this is certainly also amazing. And if you're new to this channel, you probably want to take a look at the back catalog of soon thousands of videos and interesting low-level stuff. So let's take, last but not least, a look here at the commons, which browser-centric OS like Chrome OS and Web OS. Yeah, as I mentioned, Sam asks, care about desktop. Most computers isn't longer multi-user context. Connected embedded stuff like Cypher is best option. So yes, this was a very end-user perspective. The problem is, sure, there are like UI, like desktop and UI-less operating system use cases. The problem, what I found, is that I tried this. This is how I've founded my company Exacode for, and we were not very successful. The problem is, for embedded firmware, again, people just, like I said in this video, people just want to use stuff for free. They don't want, even with this embedded Linux, and like I was joking in other videos, like if we had potential customers and something wasn't working, like we didn't use it, ARM core, or they wanted Firefox or who knows what, and it wasn't just working, or even for x86 and some bootloader, even like we had sometimes grub not working on some exotic hardware, and then so like we can't use it, and we say, yeah, we can take a look at this, can you pay us some 4 or 8 hours, and why? And then potential customers in 2006, why should they pay 4 or 8 hours for some boot issue? It's like, yeah, I mean, why not? We constantly should do all the work as senior on this channel for free, or like Firefox is not working for Armo MIPS. It's like, yeah, we can take a look at it and probably fix this like in a day or something, and then it's like mind blown of the potential customers of, I should pay a day to get Firefox fixed to cross-compile. It's like, yeah, I mean, should we sit here a day but it's your Linux distribution, this stuff needs to work. And it's like, yeah, okay, if we sit for free and it works, do you want to pay then something when it's working? It's like, yeah, maybe a little bit, but not really much. It's like, yeah. And then you were wondering why our commercial macOS applications are more successful than embedded Linux. So yeah, surely this left this embedded stuff out, but this embedded stuff truly difficult, especially when a lot of stuff is done in Asia and they just YOLO something together with a lot of security vulnerabilities and design issues, because they on a budget just iterate and rinse and repeat until it works. L3P3 says future some kind of smart and developer-friendly graphical tool combined with stuff like Rust, combined with central trusted Git repository binary packages. I mean, the problem is already, yeah, I mean, I don't have a very high trust with this. I don't think the central repositories are a good way. I think this is the same as the internet. I mean, the internet was supposed to be decentralized, so this is packages I would much rather for stability and also trust. I mean, if this central repository is hacked and after a while they are all, or people just trust it and people for sure, there was just the other day, like today or yesterday, some new case of, was it PHP or NTM or JavaScript? There were again some central repository with some malicious code and so on. So in my opinion, decentralized is usual, like next to always usually better. L3P3 agrees HTML JavaScript is already the platform. It is legacy already, yeah. So this is exactly what I meant. And so in my experience, this like trial and error, and it's like you need to use HTML elements in certain ways to trick certain animations and layout, and then fiddle around with CSS and stuff until it somewhat looks like you want it. And this is also, in my opinion, I could theoretically make a cool video about this. It's really sad in my opinion. It's the usual, it could be so much better, but the web is what we ended up with. The irony is, of course, this whole hypertext markup language stuff was designed for hypertext markup stuff and the CSS for some design. And when you then take a look on modern websites, I'll just open something. It's like, yeah, there is not so much from structured text nowadays. Everything is about design and animation, which is of course not what it was designed for. And I've actually forgot to mention one thing in the middle of the video, as per usual. But yeah, can't unfortunately right now invest more time in presenting this. It's already somewhat too much time I take to think about this videos and concepts and content and stuff. Because I wanted to say in the middle of this video with this web stuff that the problem is also this Electron apps, right? And so everything is Mac or Windows or Electron anyway. And this is also, I wanted to say, this is also due to the nature of the not very usability and like UI, like not HTML being hypertext markup language and not user interface design or usability first, but slapped on later second. The Electron apps are a huge problem, and what would be cool is if you make, like what I said, like some wine for best compatibility with Linux and web stuff native. It would be cool if you could get some Electron capable kind of design. The problem is with this Electron apps there, of course, it's crazy, of course, right? Instead of just loading the app, you're each time loading the whole web browser, which you have already on your system. And not to mention that Electron apps are super slow, resource hungry because they are freaking web browser. It would be really cool if we could have somehow web native apps without each time loading the browser. The problem is, I guess, usually this Electron stuff is modifying the Electron browser stuff to include certain features for DRM or other native stuff. But I would need to review if often they don't modify the base Chromium browser. And at least it would be cool, like for Electron stuff like Tidal or what else was Electron. I personally try to avoid Electron apps like the plug. I noticed Tidal, this music streaming stuff, was Electron. I would need to think actually hard if I ever used another. Certainly, right. This is the Discord stuff. Probably this download stuff is most likely also Electron. We can actually, how large is this stuff? 65 megabyte. It's probably Electron, isn't it? But this is also, I nearly wanted to say already that this is also crazy that each time I go to Discord for our chat here on this channel, instead of opening, this design is also stupid in my opinion. Instead of just freaking, I clicked here already 100 times of just open the bloody shit in my browser, and instead of they each time they want to force the people so much to this bloody most likely Electron app that they rather annoy the users with, instead of just opening to download the stuff. I really wonder why they desperately need to force this stuff down the throat to these people. But anyway, so yeah, people are agreeing there somewhat in terms of, yeah, but this is also, again, Linux being a single address base, not the highest design quality, and yet we keep using Linux, we keep using web, and at the end of the day, otherwise other peak bug platforms like macOS and Windows. Cheers. Tony there is set in the middle, but also HTML, JavaScript, you say L3P3 says legacy already. What would then be the state of the art web development, or what is the future of that? Tony01 Tony writes, everything JavaScript is garbage. Well, of course, nowadays it's of course interesting to see what stuff you can do native, what stuff you can do in the web. Certainly WebGL and all this fun stuff, and certainly it's also sort of quite high performance with latest and greatest just-in-time compiler technology, but so it's not like complete garbage, but it's close, somewhat close to native performance if you do it right and if you write not the worst code. But yeah, it's, as I said, this is writing a multi-server microkernel a good business idea in 2020, or what alternatives are there? And similar to what people say in the comments, Java, HTML and JavaScript are not the most amazing. It's like, yeah, often, but this is also in this world, we often end up with not the most amazing solutions or not the most perfect, because yeah, after all, we are humans, and most humans do not apply that much critical thinking. You just use Windows, they just use Mac. And this is also why I wonder that the big Linux distributions do not, they very little made efforts. Sure, there were like 20 years ago, but I would even say 20 years ago, did Red Hat make more efforts to copy Windows with GNOME than they do today? Is there still, or did all the major Linux distributions gave up on desktop? Probably another question, because I don't see that they are as hard competing with innovation that, in my opinion, probably should be necessary to push the market share over the magical 2 or so % range. Let's see, what else do we have there? L3PC writes, says grandfather runs Chrome OS on his laptop, no Windows problems to fix. Iron Oxidizer says, have you discussed L4 yet? Not really. So this was a high level talk. I only mentioned it in the list of not really to see stuff. Very theoretically, what you could do theoretically is use existing components as outlined in this video, bring them to market, and then gradually replace stuff more aggressively than Linux distributions do. Bring some hybrid stuff as outlined in this video to the market, and if you get some reasonable market share, like more than like a % or 2, and actually make $1 million, or like not like Firefox, which only lives off of Google's gracious donations there, but actually make some real money because people actually really want this, then gradually for the next decade or 2 transition this stuff to a more stable microkernel setup or something of that sort. But that certainly is also not the most easy, especially in a way that is compatible and users don't really notice. Sam writes, he thinks we need a microkernel that lets you define this in a manifest file and will execute Cortex, RISC-V, whatever it uses. Smallest defined software component with dependencies. Iron Oxidizer says Jellyfish is based on Linux. Yes, so the Jellyfish stuff that I mentioned in the middle of the live stream, yes, of course it's Linux based, because today nearly everything between Android, WebOS and Jellyfish and between is based on Linux. L3P3 writes 100% automatic dependency management, centralized managed compilation, API compatibility management. I would actually go as far as maybe, given that people like the Rust and Cargo community are working against the package distribution model that is Linux anyway, maybe actually for this, what I outlined today, maybe it would actually be more successful not to try to create an own package system, but rather like package repository like Red Hat and Debian and stuff, but rather ship some base OS like with the kernel, with the drivers, with the web browser UI components, and Wine with Windows compatibility for compatibility as outlined in this video, and not care about the package repository and only ship and update security updates base system like Linux kernel and font libraries and C and C++ libraries like that, and only ship that, similar to macOS. Because that is not only what users are known for and what users are used to, and also most normal users, they just want to run Microsoft Office, which probably we could for the most part with Wine or something, and not fall into the trap of trying to, because certainly that did not work, right? This trying to bring Unix to normal users. They don't care, maybe for good, maybe for not good reasons, but probably at the end of the day, users are not interested in getting some task manager or Office suite. They want to click on something like they do on Windows and macOS, and maybe given the lack of commercial success in the desktop space, and even where it was forced upon users, like in Germany and Munich with this Office there, which was rolled back and forth, or even the German Foreign Ministry, which, fun fact, a decade ago I even was there for one meeting. But my understanding is a decade ago the German Foreign Ministry stuff for the embassy stuff was at some point running some worldwide connected stuff on Linux, but a decade ago they might have rolled this back to Windows or something because compatibility and stuff, and don't care. But yeah, even German Foreign Ministry, compatibility and ease of use before security and stuff, because that is so human. Sam wrote, is macOS Windows a competitor though? What do you mean with that? Competitor to Linux or Mac versus Windows? It's not. Iron Oxidizer says, when you say bitcode, do you mean something similar to LVM, LVM intermediate representation JIT? Well, sort of. Maybe like WebAssembly. Actually, theoretically, we could base on WebAssembly. The problem is, I took a look at this WebAssembly because certainly, as I said in the beginning, I'm not that insane to write everything from scratch. But even some WebAssembly stuff like crane lift, and so a lot of this new web stuff is like really annoying to build. Like it's a lot of Rust stuff, which is not the worst, but was it crane lift? But I really have a problem with a lot of new open source stuff that has moved. But a lot of this modern stuff that just like, is it cargo? It's like, yeah, oftentimes it doesn't even build. The cargo people always like, it's amazing, but then I tried and it doesn't even build for me. And then it builds half an hour and only builds half, and somehow this new Rust and cargo stuff, as amazing as it sounds in advertising, it is not yet as amazing, and certainly not fast to build for me in praxis. Sam writes, so I mean this in principle, so LVM intermediate representation, to be truly usable, this LLVM IR is mostly platform specific. So apparently Apple is recompiling stuff with Rosetta 2 according to the presentation. So it's not impossible, but it's LLVM IR is probably not made for the most dynamic jitting reasons. It probably could be used for that, but a lot of even WebKit's JavaScript stuff moved maybe partially away from LLVM. The problem with LLVM is that it's huge and slow to start, so there is a huge latency. So you could use it, probably for that use case, the LLVM IR should be more architecture agnostic and more portable. Something more like WebAssembly might be more usable or something of that sort, but yeah. Some writes to them, a U-kernel should be minimal in a way and should work on everything from a toaster to a super. Yeah, so this is exactly what I really would like to also work on. I will continue a little bit. Certainly I don't have dreams with some commercial breakthrough, but you never know, sometimes your 20% projects also take off. But as I said, reusing this other UI, Linux web and Wine resources is certainly a much more commercial, fruitful and easier way to go. Sam writes, desktop is a small fish. Well, tells us Microsoft. I understand low power embedded edge computing cloud desktop. I understand what you're saying, but I was burned once and we had a super tough time. Also tells us this no-name manufacturers who just clobber there something together that barely works and is full of security vulnerabilities of your IoT stuff based on Linux. But yeah, sure, but there is a lot of embedded, but it's even harder to sell. There are some other competitors and you the whole time only talk about features, competition, and this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah, a 3P3, possible precompiled modules together, target phone specific something. Sam writes, IoT, you can update single module, entire flash content, like it's done. It's done now. Modules can be loaded, unloaded. Google has Zircon and Snap U kernels. Yeah, so we have taken a look at this Zircon. It was, so, I mean, some things I see here are nice. I mean, some things, for example, in this Zircon kernel, what I would have done differently is I would have written this stuff with APIs more resembling regular C APIs. They have their all the Zircon prefix stuff. This, in my opinion, would be really nice to be more flexible to reuse code without changing all the Zircon specific stuff all over the place. That is a little bit beside Fiddle and it's like interface definition language of yeah. But yeah, we will see. I mean, the nice thing of running Wine and Android compatibility is theoretically you could switch the kernel underneath it if you work on a couple of years for that to happen. But on the other hand, as long as you have more device driver support in the Linux kernel, that is of course a problem, right? Everyone brings their own device with some exotic Wi-Fi and graphic, and not to mention the bloody situation we are in due to the NVIDIA binary only stuff and no register level documentation. Now the stuff jumped enormously because chat scroll back. So let's go a little bit faster over the comments as per usual. There are quite some, and so yeah, they were correct. Probably need to hurry with maybe someday. As yeah, I understand why some big YouTubers only read super chats, because if I even try to scroll here over just half of the comments, even just scrolling there is central server source modules. You should force hardware vendors to help open source. Yeah, I mean, I think additionally to right to repair, I think there should be a right to own the hardware interface definition to your stuff, like NVIDIA GPUs or any other server RAID and mobile phone stuff, so that you can bring your post-market OS stuff, being at Linux or Haiku or whatever, not forcing the vendors to write a Linux driver, because maybe in 5 or 10 years we don't have Linux anymore because some other system is more amazing, but just plain out providing hardware level ABI of application, or like hardware binary interface, kind of RTL register level definition, free of charge and without non-disclosure agreement. But as I said, even a decade ago, I asked NVIDIA for embedded projects, and even with wanting to sign an NDA, and even with engaging NVIDIA of, hey, we have an embedded project and we need Integra drivers that we want to write ourselves for this partner, we even signed an NDA, and even in 2006, or it's on my blog there, NVIDIA didn't want to give us a shit. So yeah, so not helping other people, but being forced to provide definitions, hardware definitions in such a way that it documents the hardware that users purchased for repair and other alternative software creation reasons. Iron Axel says, look at Pico Rio, initial target platform for your ukernel, Linux capable RISC-V board. That sounds amazing. Probably right now, anyway, we can have a quad-core RISC-V 32-bit on this ULX3S previous video, so probably first FPGA. What is it? FreeRTOS built on? I think FreeRTOS is probably built from scratch, which certainly is also pretty usable, but last time I looked also a little bit C heavy, if not 99% C probably. For that reason, I would at least some lightweight C, embedded C++ for some sane string handling, and as good as FreeRTOS might be for the most part. Actually can fact check, as we are a huge fan of not posting uncontrolled FreeRTOS Git, and I think the last time include portable tasks. Nah. So oh my god, if dev macros with spaces, and okay, the first file I open and I already need to throw up. Oh my, the C style. I mean, this kind of formatting already makes me throw up, to be honest. Which is of course not how you should judge code. I mean, at least they used int8 and not some uchar or unsigned char. Yeah, I mean, sure, it is RTOS, but this is exactly why I say we should have used embedded C++, lightweight embedded C++ for some sane string handling for a long time. Anyway, where's this dark mode scroll was also barely invisible, but anyway. Darn. What else do we have here? So, but not a new kernel. Currently building hobby microkernel. So Roland is also building a hobby microkernel. ARch64 RISC-64 after QEMU target. So yeah, happy to see other people also do some playing along at home and research. That is amazing, because as I said already, here you go, is Linux killing all OS innovation, and in some way it is, but can you blame them if it takes a decade of work to write drivers when you can just use the Linux ones for free? Vapor Sunrise says, don't use Electron, use Qt WebKit. How is Qt WebKit better than Electron? Please explain. Aaron Oxidizer writes, the reason why Electron got so popular is simply because building native across all systems is awful. Well, yeah, sure, that is a problem, maybe, but this is also Intel, Microsoft, Windows wanted to lock people in their awful Windows 32 API that was awful and not open source. Mac had their Mac API, and later next step, because fun fact, the current app and UI kit stuff is based on next steps work, next work, and not macOS work, in case you didn't know. If there would have been some like web-like cross-platform standard, yeah, as per usual, if there would be open standards, but this is also vendors like Microsoft and Apple locking the users in and not caring about an open standard because their eliteness, then it is what we are in 2020, and people rather build web applications in Electron than doing something native. And yeah, certainly, even as I said, even in my opinion, GTK and stuff are not as most amazing. So someone asked Discord, is there, but yeah, set world that native development, cross-platform development is also, well, certainly on Win32 and other stuff is not as amazing that we are here with desktop web applications, right? So someone asked about Discord to join. Yes, I just posted the links there again, in case you're still there. And Legit writes, OS Web, what I think Rust Cargo is a good solution. So iron oxidizer writes Rust Cargo is a good solution. For this makes building an ARM actually something easy as cargo run 90% of the time. Well, the thing is, as I said before, for me, cargo Rust is not nicely integrating with our Linux, and in general, I really don't like this massive micro dependency stuff of 150 dependencies just to build Rust and cargo, and the centralized storage. I wouldn't mind a cargo TOML of Tom's obviously minimal language definition stuff for building software, if it would also not be centralized, like you specify someone's person there. In this central repositories are always point of hacking and fail and similar stuff, but yeah. And in general, this Rust stuff so far also not the most readable language, as advertising as it always reads in marketing lists. It's so far didn't really deliver too much positive stuff for me, as much as it is hype. But yeah, this is always the year of Rust, and then in some years it's maybe mostly forgotten because people got tired of its limitations and Rust and cargo and stuff on micro dependencies. Iron Oxidizer writes web performance is very close to native with web GPU and WebAssembly. No, it's a good, not that it's a good idea, might as well write native app at that point. Yeah, but this is also, as I said, this is maybe why it might be a successful OS distribution solution that fixes or solves a lot of native support questions. They've, like Iron Oxidizer further writes Pronos Linux desktops that their major that the major graphical user interface frameworks are majorly bloated and poorly designed. Yeah, this is also what I said. Thanks for confirming. I mean, this is also what I, not only GTK plus of VRC, thank you very much, Qt also total bloatware of, I said this before, previous video, 500 and 800 megabyte download, yes, documentation and whatnot, but what's like also building for on the epic thread ripping AMD Ryzen, you're building for longer than Rust and cargo or something. And yeah, Rust, more comments, Rust upcoming cross-platform toolkit called Druid, which is much better design, modern patterns, design architectures. Like, yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Apollo team CPU uses open source arrows, hand optimized assembler using FPGA cores to hate bloatware in the world. Iron Oxidizer writes GTK2 wasn't bad, but the transition to GTK3 was awful. GTK3 dropped useful features like DirectFP was becoming more bloated and even more improving key features like native design. Yeah, this is also, I mean, again, it's C, for me it's already, if it's C in 2020, not only programming, but in my opinion also like modern, totally snappy, amazing UI stuff you don't write in static and manual string and struct fiddling languages like C, also not in C++. For like truly award-winning and amazing UI stuff, you want something much more dynamic, native, and certainly not C. But yeah. Roland writes, wonder how long it's scrolled away where, wonder how long to wait to actually use C++20. Yeah, the question is, do you really even want to use C++20? Angelo writes, what's your opinion with OpenBSD and the kernel, better or worse? I said this before, the BSDs, NetBSD, OpenBSD, kind of the same. OpenBSD is only more secure because less random changes, but the code is even more legacy, like even more old-fashioned C code. And again, the only reason it's more secure than Linux is like they, like 50% of the time spent on security review of C code and less random changes, and the other 50% they spent on writing new stuff. And in contrast to the Linux kernel, where my impression is somewhat like 80% of the resources are in the Linux kernel spent on rewriting stuff and cleaning stuff up, so they constantly break stuff and cause new regressions and new security vulnerabilities. And due to the ever-changingness that even gets on my nerves, in the Linux kernel we have more regressions, more security, and certainly with more features. Like OpenBSD simply has like 1% of the feature set of the Linux kernel, and if you have no features and don't change your code, and the 50% of the time you do a security review with having only the most minimal features, and yeah, sure, then you have less security issues. But do you want to? Well, certainly for firewall embedded systems it might be somewhat okay, if, although in my opinion, recurring theme in 2020, we should really not write anything and run anything in C anymore. Again, all the string handling, it's tedious and insane. I know it triggers people and C programmers, but seriously, if you want this, although the funny thing is C programmers hate C++ for that, but I'm not even saying use all the C++ features. I mean, even if, I said this before, just using proper string type that somewhat is a C++ standard string would reduce likely 50%, makes the code more readable, and among other things easily remove 50% of the bugs, if not more, plus some proper, more like not always doing pointer fiddling and buffer over and underrun with it. Asymmetrics write Corber interfaces. You probably mean this is probably some time ago. You probably meant this with Fuchsia, I guess, or something. But yeah. So yeah, Sam asked for this Discord. I just posted this. Would continue outside of this YouTube chat. That is amazing. I posted this already, and Minix 3 seems outdated, but it's a microkernel version of NetBSD. Seems like a good starting point. Microkernels. So the problem, your comment sounds reasonable in theory. The problem with that is, I mean, I think Minix was not NetBSD. Not sure if in previous versions they based on NetBSD. They only, from what I remember, which might be only partially right, is that they started to migrate to NetBSD, more NetBSD userland of like those programs that are CP for copy and MV for move and stuff like that the last decade. Not sure if they ever had done this, but anyway, these programs, in my opinion, are the least, it's not interesting problems to solve. These are only tiny, most minimal utility stuff that's not even worth to talk much about. And the big problem with Minix is that it's, as I said, a totally old-fashioned code base, not really nice C. It's not even nice C. It's really old-fashioned C, some libkernel, and xlit mbr is like, nah. Now this is an amazing source. I always manage to click here on the most amazing sources. So yeah, in my opinion, also this is not something that's probably imported via here, mostly headers. There would be some. Anyway, it's not state of the art. It's like vintage C code, similar to OpenBSD. In old-fashioned style. Oh, here's some Minix maybe. Oh, here's some drivers and FS. That's probably what we were looking for. So let's click here on like some, and this is, in my opinion, a bit of a problem. Let's click here on some USB storage. I wonder if they reuse that from something. So that is Minix 3 USB mass storage implementation, DDE kit of the block driver. And let's see what we also here, static character buffers. You had me at large. I mean, seriously. I mean, if this is also why I'm last but not least, and then we really end this live stream. And I thank you already for. Cannot see. Oh, sorry. Did I press some wrong button? I hope this wasn't too long. It's almost too fat fingering there on my navigation cluster. So you had me at static buffer for erp read write operations. It's like, seriously, what the heck? Otherwise, in my opinion, well, it's not the worst code I've seen in Minix, but I would also, I mean, so this does not look that bad except the one static stuff, but then again, also this probably only, this might have some endiness issues. I wonder, do they swap this? As I said earlier, in this day and age, even I would do, at least they just lock it here directly, so maybe this only works on little Indian or something, or wherever they assign this. But as I said in previous live streams, stuff should be more automated. Even like this is also why I said endiness swapping shouldn't be like previous videos, Linux kernel, SCSI, QLogic, fiber channel, endiness bug for 6 years. It wouldn't happen if we would have endiness annotations here. So I would do, as I said here, I would do here automated endiness conversion stuff, doing stuff low level constantly, the manual way. Also type def in the middle of a functions. And I mean, maybe the SCSI sensing should this not be in some code? I mean, this is, if I, so constantly, my challenge is I've seen so much stuff, and when I look at this, all right, I wanted to say, so the reason why I'm not in a university, when I look at this university code here, so maybe this was not directly written by Andreas Tenbaum and stuff, but a lot of this stuff, L4, Minix 3, not the most successful. And then when I look at this, often the code of init CSV of mem setting this, apparently. Again, this could be constructors. This is like really, it's 2020. I mean, seriously, what are we even discussing? The lowest hanging fruit of automatic endiness conversions. Some like why was C with classes invented probably in the 80s? Why are we still manually mem setting stuff, of having init functions and not like object kind of? I mean, the least minimal, somewhat automated syntactic sugar of making the life of a programmer less tedious, less error prone, a little bit easier. Some sources I looked at, maybe this code was not so bad because it is new. I in the past looked on some things that were truly awful, whatever they were. Let's click here on PCI and then call it a day. Do they also have a static? Apparently they have, what is this PCI number? So they have, it looks, is this defining here a maximum sized number of drivers thing? Seriously? But apparently on a first glance, and fake a device was required. What fake device? Anyway, as you see, probably not the most modern C code, not the, like, if you already do micro kernel with multi-server stuff, why not, it should do some more dynamic management than PCI ACLs of PCI ACLs numbered drivers, apparently, if this is on the first glance what it looks like. And also why I'm not in university. Also, this is why in a university I might need to teach people and spend like 80% of the time dealing with teaching and not with the research. Or I have heard so much stuff. I had friends and family working at university. Many of them are not the most happy. A lot of them didn't have the most success. A lot of them couldn't do what they want. Some female people had some really strange stories of need to be somewhat careful of being made promises of success there that then came with being relatively close to some professors, if you know what I mean. I'm not saying that this is like 100% of the time, but if I have some friends and family and I don't hear the most positive stuff, which probably gets into some video of should the university system be reinvented. But I don't see how I could have been more productive when I would have taught at the university than what I do here on whatever my own schedule I'm currently doing. And yeah, and this is also what I try to do with this channel, doing more neuro level research and my own 20% time and financing this myself, which maybe I really should try to, now that I thought about this more, how to also, maybe not the best idea to announce this here on YouTube. This is also the difference between, I could have maybe made some startup, that is also the different startup culture of not as easy, although people say this is, at least before the pandemic, in last year's Germany and Europe and stuff, the new Silicon Valley 2.0 and stuff. I don't really see that here. Financing here is much more difficult. Maybe going with such a thing nicely packed with PowerPoint slides to some US investors might even be successful, but the luxury is we sell some apps. I'm not starving tomorrow. I can make these live streams here and try to inspire people like I maybe couldn't do on a university, or in general build this channel to also have the possibility to do even more research, like new JIT stuff, more microkernel stuff, more firmware stuff. And what I said in a previous video, not re-implementing this, what I said, the firmware, the bootloader, the kernel has again file system implementation, like all the hardware details or most of the hardware details, and like maybe creating a new kind of what I said previously, microkernel with nanokernel hardware abstraction layer of truly universally more reusable software without re-implementing the wheel, and maybe much more UI first, like think cubes of UI first and virtualization OS containers first. There is so much you could do if you should not just reuse Linux and Xen or other stuff. But that's it for this video. Thanks for all the comments staying here. I hope I didn't show the other fixed screen too long. Yeah, thanks for joining. I hope you can recommend this. I hope you learned something. And how to code asymmetrics, but how to code. I showed this in another video. Probably I should. Some people ask about programming 101. And for sure I will continue with this. I can last but not least show you auto-Indianus conversion. Good books, not really. It's if you have the chance today with mask and stuff, either go to a bookstore, like a huge bookstore, which might not be easy. Otherwise browse online. I usually try to, well, before the analog stuff and like a decade ago, I usually like to take a look at some books and have chosen based on my level of experience what looks sophisticated in a way that I learn new things, and not like whatever your skill level might be, just getting some recommended book and it's not totally matching your style and already existing level of education. Pico RV virtues, maybe this is the wrong one. Pico RV32, Pico SOC, and probably I have this in this firmware thing of previous ULX3S. Let's hope this is still the large Emacs for presenting. And I have this in exact image. So this is open source in our exact image processing repository. And Indianus repository I've done here in lightweight C++ with templates. So we have here C++ template class. This is just a summary, but defining wrapping here a type like UN32 with big or little Indianus traits. And behind the scene, I just don't find my pointer right now because usability, here, there it is. And so behind the scenes, this is utility endianness. So these are some, and also, yeah, this code is super old, probably coming out of our GSMP, General Sound Manipulation Project kind of stuff. And so this is using some byte swapping stuff and then templates with some template-based type specialization, just to hook this up with whatever platform byte swapping this has. And this, like, wire it up once, wrap it with a template, and then instantiate it, like, and converting stuff. And other people previously, like other clever experts, I should have actually, in retrospect, I should have done what some people commented the last time, which is type defing this to like this to LE32 or LE little endianness. So either this or I don't know, you get the idea, the detail. I think maybe the Linux kernel had that, so you can make this as nice with just one more type def. And well, 8 makes not really much sense. You could do 8 for uniformity, but otherwise 16 and stuff. And then you never do this again. Same, oh wait a second, this is big endianness, but you get the idea. Big endian 16 and U and signed. So maybe U and signed 16, little endian, not sure what. Anyway, little endian is signed. Whatever the best type might be, but you can brainstorm something like this for some 20 minutes and then, or just use what's the, but again, in the Linux kernel, they just name it for mental remembering that the magic is that this stuff will do it automatically and you just write regular assignments and avoid all the bugs that come with scene, even in the Linux kernel, with manually doing that in 2020. Yeah, so yeah, hope you enjoyed this and learned something. Some people is obviously tuned out with this long of live stream. Maybe we should have kept it shorter. Maybe, yeah, maybe I really eventually transition to do the main content without comments first and then switch to the more live channel for the comments or something, because the super long videos are not the most watched later on YouTube. In any case, I hope you learned something. As usual, leave in the comments below what you think. For example, yeah, was all the web and Windows compatibility. Theoretically, you could even do Mac compatibility, just that this proprietary Objective-C stuff is a little bit more annoying. But otherwise, some Android, like Android libraries and Wine stuff for 90% of the compatibility with some Mac OS like shipped Linux distribution and otherwise regular package and snap and whatnot stuff to install. Maybe that would be a truly amazing thing. Leave me in the comments below. Otherwise, microkernel and firmware. And but as seen on the more live channel Security 2020, we surely need to do something, which I try to call out here. And I hope to see you soon for the next live streams, including more RISC-V stuff here on FPGA. And otherwise, I hope to see you next time. And we somehow had 0 drop frames with, I wonder what was the bit rate for some reason. 3.8 Mbit only, but at least 0 drop frames.